The morning sun spilled over the rooftops of Oak Ridge like warm honey, soft and golden. Birds chirped from the oak trees lining the quiet street, and the air carried that calm, unhurried feeling that only comes on a rare Saturday with nothing urgent on the calendar. In a modest house with pale blue shutters and a well-kept garden, a woman sat by her backyard pool, finally breathing. She'd been up before dawn most of the week dealing with staffing shortages, reviewing use of force reports, calming tensions between city council and the patrol division. But today was hers. She wore oversized sunglasses, a wide-brimmed straw hat, and a simple one-piece swimsuit. Her feet dangled in the cool water, and a glass of iced tea sweated gently on the small table beside her. No uniform, no radio, no title, just peace. Her name was Danielle, though no one on the street really knew that yet. She'd moved in 6 months ago after selling her old place across town. Too many memories, too much noise. This neighborhood felt different. Tree-lined, slower, the kind of place where people watered their lawns in the evening and waved from their driveways. She'd hoped for anonymity here, a chance to just be a person instead of a position, and for a few hours this morning it was working. Next door, behind lace curtains in a neatly kept colonial-style home, a man watched. He'd seen the moving trucks months ago, heard the hammering as the new neighbor fixed up the backyard. But they'd never spoken. He didn't know her name, her job, or that she'd spent 20 years in law enforcement, rising through the ranks not with fanfare, but with quiet consistency and a reputation for fairness. All he saw was a black woman in a swimsuit, lounging by a pool in a neighborhood where most faces looked like his. He wasn't angry exactly, just uneasy, not because of anything she'd done. She hadn't made noise, hadn't invited guests, hadn't even played music. But something about her presence felt off to him, though he couldn't say why. Maybe it was the way she sat so still, so at ease, as if she truly belonged, or maybe it was the quiet assumption that had settled in his mind without him even noticing, that someone like her wouldn't own a home like this, that she must be visiting. Or worse, trespassing. He picked up his phone. Not 911, this wasn't an emergency, he told himself. But the non-emergency line felt justified. "Yeah, hi," he said when the dispatcher answered. "I live on Sycamore Lane. There's a woman in the backyard next door, sunbathing in the pool. I don't think she lives there. She doesn't look like she belongs." His voice was calm, almost polite, as if reporting a loose dog or a missed trash pickup. He gave a vague description, dark-skinned, wearing sunglasses, and hung up feeling a small sense of civic duty. He wasn't being mean, he thought. Just cautious. Just looking out for the neighborhood. Back by the pool, Danielle stretched, letting the sun warm her shoulders. She thought about the stack of unread novels on her nightstand, the farmer's market downtown she'd been meaning to visit, the way her niece laughed when she tried to do cartwheels. For the first time in months, her mind wasn't racing ahead to the next crisis. She closed her eyes, listening to the gentle ripple of the water, the distant hum of a lawnmower 2 streets over. She didn't hear the patrol car pull up quietly at the front of her house, didn't see the 2 officers step out, radios clipped to their belts, expressions neutral but alert. They'd been sent on what sounded like a routine welfare check, possible unauthorized person at residence. Standard procedure. Knock, verify, move on. One officer, younger with close-cropped hair and a name tag that read Reyes, glanced at his partner, a veteran named Chen, who'd worked this beat for over a decade. "You know this house?" Reyes asked quietly. Chen frowned. "New owner moved in last winter. Kept to herself. Paid her HOA fees on time. No complaints," he paused. But dispatch said the caller sounded concerned. They walked around the side gate, which was unlocked but not open. Just a quiet path between 2 homes, and there she was. Danielle opened her eyes when she heard footsteps on the patio stones. She sat up slowly, shielding her eyes from the sun with one hand. The officers froze for half a second, not out of fear but surprise, because standing there in swimwear and sandals was the last person they expected to find. Chen's eyes widened. "Chief?" he said, voice dropping an octave. Danielle didn't flinch. She just looked at them, calm, waiting. Reyes blinked. "Wait, Chief Carter?" She nodded once. "Officer Chen, Officer Reyes, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Chen cleared his throat, suddenly awkward. "We, got a call. Neighbor reported a suspicious person using the pool. Said they didn't recognize you. a beat of silence. The kind that carries weight. I live here, Danielle said simply. Not angry. Not defensive. Just stating a fact like saying the sky is blue. Of course you do, Chen said quickly. We're sorry, Chief, the caller didn't. They didn't know. Danielle stood, wrapping a towel around her shoulders. She walked over to the small table and picked up her phone, unlocked it, pulled up her property tax receipt, her driver's license. She handed it to Chen without a word. He glanced at it, then handed it back. No need, Chief, we know who you are, but she held his gaze. Do you, or do you just know my badge? The question hung in the air, light but sharp. Chen didn't answer right away. He knew her reputation. Fair. No nonsense, the kind of leader who showed up at funerals for officers' family members and remembered the names of dispatchers' kids. But he also knew how quickly assumptions could override facts, especially when skin color was involved. Reyes shifted uncomfortably. We'll let the caller know it was a misunderstanding, he offered. Danielle nodded. Please do, and tell them. It's okay to say hello next time instead of calling the police. The officers left quietly, the gate clicking shut behind them. Danielle sat back down, but the peace was gone. The sun still shone, the water still sparkled, but something had shifted. It wasn't the first time this had happened, not by a long shot. But it was the first time it happened in her own backyard, on her own day off, while she was doing nothing more than existing in her own skin. She looked up at the sky, took a slow breath, and finished her iced tea. The neighborhood felt different now. Not hostile exactly, but watchful. Like she was being seen, but not truly known. And in that moment, she realized something. No matter how high she rose, no matter how many stars she wore on her collar, some people would always see her first as a question. Not a neighbor, but she wasn't going anywhere. This was her home. And maybe, just maybe, that quiet Saturday morning was the beginning of something bigger. Not a confrontation, but a conversation waiting to happen. For now, though, she leaned back, closed her eyes again, and let the sun do its work. She'd earned this rest, and she'd be damned if anyone made her feel like she didn't belong in it. The patrol car rolled away slowly, tires whispering over the quiet street. Inside, the two officers sat in silence for a long moment. Officer Chen kept his eyes on the road, jaw tight. Officer Reyes fiddled with the radio dial, then stopped, his fingers hovering over the mic. You think she's going to report the call? Reyes finally asked, voice low. Chen shook his head. Not her style. But that doesn't mean it didn't sting. Reyes exhaled. I mean, the caller said suspicious person, didn't say why. But we both know what that usually means. Chen didn't answer right away. He'd been on the force long enough to recognize the pattern. The coded language, the sideways glances, the way certain complaints always seemed to follow the same script. He'd also seen how leaders like Chief Carter handled those moments, with grace but never silence. Not really. Back at the station, the call log was updated, resolved. Resident confirmed as homeowner. No drama, no write-up. Just a dry line in a digital record that would vanish into the system by next week. But the weight of it lingered. Meanwhile, Danielle stayed by the pool for another hour, though the calm had shifted. She wasn't angry, not in the hot, shouting way. It was quieter than that. A slow burn of disappointment, the kind that settles in your chest when you realize you're still being measured by someone else's assumptions, even in your own home. She finally stood, gathered her towel and glass, and went inside. The house was cool and quiet, sunlight filtering through the kitchen blinds. She filled the kettle for tea, real tea this time, not iced, and leaned against the counter, staring out the window at the backyard. The pool shimmered innocent and still. It hadn't done anything wrong. Neither had she. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from her assistant. Heard about the call, you okay? She typed back, fine, just another Saturday, but she wasn't fine. Not completely. Because what bothered her most wasn't the call itself, it was the ease of it. The way someone could look at her, see a black woman enjoying a moment of peace and immediately assume she didn't belong. And worse, assume that calling the police was the right move. She thought about all the people who didn't have a badge to flash, who wouldn't get an apology, who might not even get to explain before things escalated. That thought sat heavier than the rest. Later that afternoon, she drove downtown, not in her cruiser, just her old sedan with the dented fender. She parked near the station but didn't go in. Instead, she walked to a small cafe 2 blocks away. the kind with mismatched chairs and chalkboard menus. She ordered a black coffee and sat by the window. A few minutes later, Chen walked in. He spotted her right away and gave a small nod before ordering. He brought his coffee to her table without asking. "Mind if I join?" he said. "Only if you're not here to file a report on me sunbathing," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. He sat down. "I spoke to the dispatcher. Got the caller's info. It was the neighbor, Mr. Henderson, lives right next door." Danielle stirred her coffee slowly. "I figured." He didn't use any slurs, Chen added quickly as if that made it better. "Just said you didn't look like you lived there." She looked up. "And what does someone who looks like they live there look like in Oak Ridge, officer?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. They sat in silence for a while, watching people pass on the sidewalk, a teenager on a skateboard, an older couple holding hands, a delivery rider balancing 3 bags on his scooter. Ordinary life unfolding without suspicion. "You know," Danielle said finally, "I bought that house because it reminded me of where I grew up. Modest, trees in the yard, a porch where you could sit and wave at folks. I thought it'd be a place to finally breathe." Chen nodded. "It should be. But breathing while black," she said softly, "sometimes feels like a privilege, not a right." He met her eyes. "What do you want to do about it?" She took a sip of coffee. "I don't want to punish him. Calling the cops on someone for existing isn't illegal, even if it feels wrong. But I do want him to see me. Really see me. Not as a suspicious person, but as his neighbor." Chen leaned back. "That's harder than writing a ticket." "Yeah," she said. "But it lasts longer." Back at the station, word had started to spread, not through official channels, but the way things always do in close-knit departments. A rookie asked Reyes what happened. Reyes told him carefully without naming names. Soon a few sergeants were talking in hushed tones near the break room. Some were furious. "She's the chief. Who does that guy think he is?" Others were quieter, more thoughtful. It could have been anyone. That's the scary part. One young officer, fresh out of the academy, pulled Chen aside. "Would you have done the same if, she wasn't the chief?" Chen looked at him for a long moment. "I hope I'd have the sense to knock first and ask questions later. But I can't promise I wouldn't have gone. We respond to calls. That's the job. But what if the call's based on bias?" the rookie pressed. "Then we've got a bigger problem," Chen said. "And it's not just the callers." That evening, Danielle sat on her back porch as the sun dipped below the rooftops. Fireflies blinked in the garden. The pool was still, reflecting the first stars. She thought about calling her sister, but decided against it. She didn't want pity. She wanted understanding. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from the neighborhood group chat. Someone had heard there was police activity on Sycamore today. "Everything okay?" Another replied, "Probably just a noise complaint. Kids playing too loud again." A third, "Nah, I saw the car at the Blue House." "New neighbor, right?" Then from someone else, "She's been there 6 months. And she's super quiet. Seems nice." Danielle read the messages, heart thudding slightly. No one mentioned her name. No one said anything cruel. But the curiosity was there, wrapped in concern. She wondered if Mr. Henderson was reading it too, wondering if his call had sparked gossip. She didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, she went inside, turned on soft music, some old jazz her dad used to play, and made herself a simple dinner. As she ate, she thought about what came next. She could ignore it. Pretend it didn't happen. Move on. But that felt like letting the moment win. Because this wasn't really about a pool or a phone call. It was about belonging. About whether a person could exist in a space without having to prove they earned the right to be there. And she was tired of proving. Not with anger. Not with power. But with presence. She finished her meal, washed the dishes, and stepped back outside. The night air was cool now. She wrapped a light sweater around her shoulders and sat on the edge of the patio, listening to the crickets. Somewhere nearby, a screen door creaked shut. A dog barked once, then fell silent. Life in Oak Ridge went on, unaware of the quiet reckoning happening in one backyard. But Danielle knew, and for the first time since the officers left, she felt a flicker of something other than weariness. Purpose. Because maybe, just maybe, this awkward, uncomfortable moment could become something else. Not a wound, but a bridge. She didn't know how yet, but she knew she wasn't going to hide. After all, she'd earned the right to sit in her own backyard in her own skin, under her own stars, and no anonymous phone call was going to take that away. The next few days passed with a strange kind of quiet. Not the peaceful kind Danielle had hoped for when she moved to Oak Ridge, but the tense kind. The kind that comes after something unspoken has shifted in the air. People still waved from their driveways, still watered their lawns at dusk, still walked their dogs down the sidewalk. But now, when Danielle stepped outside to check her mailbox or take out the recycling, she noticed the glances. Quick, curious, sometimes pulled away too fast. She didn't imagine it. The neighborhood group chat, usually filled with lost cat alerts and recommendations for plumbers, had gone oddly quiet after that one thread about police activity. Then, 2 days later, a new message popped up. Just want to say I love how clean our streets are. Really proud of our community. It felt forced, like someone trying to smooth over a wrinkle no one wanted to name. Danielle didn't post. She watched. And what she saw surprised her. Some neighbors defended her without even knowing it was her. She keeps her yard nice, always polite, never causes trouble. Others were more cautious. Well, we don't know the full story. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. And then there was the one who wrote, look, if someone looks out of place, it's natural to be cautious. Better safe than sorry. That last message sat in her stomach like a stone. At work, things were different. Her team knew. Not because she told them, but because news like that travels fast in a department, especially when it involves the chief. Some officers stopped by her office just to check in. Others left small gestures, a fresh pot of coffee on her desk, a sticky note that read, "We've got your back." But not everyone was on the same page. During a morning briefing, one lieutenant, a man who'd been with the force longer than Danielle had been alive, cleared his throat and said, "Look, I get it, but let's not turn this into a race thing." The guy didn't know who she was. Happens all the time. Danielle didn't snap. She didn't raise her voice. She just looked at him and said, "If it only happens to certain people, then it is a race thing. Even if no one says the word." The room went still. He didn't argue, but he didn't apologize either. Later that day, a young dispatcher, a woman with bright eyes and a voice that never shook even during 911 calls, slipped a handwritten note under Danielle's door. It read, "My brother got stopped 3 times last summer just for walking home from the library. Thank you for not letting it go unnoticed." That note stayed on her desk. At home, Danielle started paying attention in a new way. She noticed how Mr. Henderson, her neighbor, the caller, never came out when she was in the yard. How his blinds stayed closed in the afternoon, even on sunny days. Once she saw him taking out his trash at dawn, like he was avoiding her. She didn't confront him, not yet. But she wondered what he was feeling. Shame and defensiveness, or did he still believe he'd done the right thing? One evening, as she sat on her porch with a book, a woman from 2 houses down walked by with her toddler. She slowed, hesitated, then smiled. "Hi there. I'm Lila. We haven't officially met, but..." "Welcome to the street," Danielle stood. "Thanks. I'm Danielle." Lila shifted her son to her other hip. "I saw the police car the other day. Hope everything's okay." "It is now," Danielle said gently. Lila nodded like she understood more than she was saying. "Some folks around here take a while to warm up. But most of us, we're glad you're here." It was a small moment, but it mattered. Still, the weight of the incident lingered, not just for her, but for the whole neighborhood. You could feel it in the way conversation stopped when someone walked by, in the careful neutrality of hellos, in the sudden absence of casual backyard barbecues. Danielle thought a lot about what to do. Part of her wanted to file an official complaint. Another part wanted to move again, find a place where she wouldn't have to explain her right to exist. But the biggest part, the part that had carried her through 2 decades of tough calls and sleepless nights, knew that walking away wouldn't fix anything because this wasn't just about her. She remembered a call from years ago. A black teenager stopped for looking suspicious while waiting for his mom outside a grocery store. He hadn't done anything wrong, but the fear in his eyes, the way his hands shook even after officers confirmed he was fine, that stayed with her. She'd written a report, pushed for better training, but the system moved slowly. Now she was the system, and she had a choice: let this fade into silence or use it to open a door. She didn't want a confrontation. She didn't want to shame Mr. Henderson publicly. But she also didn't want to pretend it didn't happen. Because pretending meant accepting that this was normal, and it wasn't. One afternoon, she sat at her kitchen table with a notebook. She wasn't writing a memo or a policy draft. She was sketching out an idea, a simple gathering. No agenda, no speeches. Just coffee, maybe some store-bought pastries, and a chance to talk like human beings. She'd call it a backyard coffee hour, open to anyone on the block. No pressure, no expectations, just presence. She knew some wouldn't come. Some might even roll their eyes. But if even one person showed up willing to listen, really listen, it would be worth it. That night, she drafted a short message for the neighborhood chat. Friendly, light, no mention of the incident. Just, "Hi neighbors. I'm hosting a little coffee get-together this Saturday morning in my backyard. 9 a.m., come as you are. Hope to see some of you." She hit send before she could overthink it. Within minutes, replies started trickling in. "Oh, that sounds nice. Will there be decaf? Sorry, we'll be out of town." And then after a long pause, "I'll be there, no name." Just those 3 words. But Danielle knew. Her heart beat a little faster. Because that was the first real crack in the wall. Not with anger. Not with authority, but with an invitation. She went to bed that night not with frustration, but with a quiet kind of hope. The kind that doesn't shout but stays steady, like a porch light left on for someone finding their way home. The next morning, she walked out to her backyard and looked at the space where she'd been sunbathing just days before. The same spot where 2 officers had stood, confused and apologetic. Now it would become something else. Not a scene of suspicion, but a place of connection. She didn't know if it would change everything. But she knew it could change something, and sometimes that's enough. Saturday morning arrived with soft clouds and a breeze that carried the scent of blooming jasmine from the yard next door. Danielle woke early, not out of habit from work, but because her mind wouldn't settle. She made coffee, strong, black, and stood by the kitchen window watching the backyard. The small folding table was already set with mismatched mugs, a thermos, and a box of pastries from the bakery downtown. Nothing fancy. Just enough to say, "You're welcome here." She'd spent the week preparing, not for a speech or a performance, but for something quieter. Presence. She'd ironed her favorite linen shirt, watered the potted plants on the patio, even swept the flagstones clean, not to impress but to honor the moment. Because this wasn't about proving a point, it was about making space for one. By 8:45 a.m., she heard the first footsteps on the sidewalk. A woman from 3 houses down, Lila with her toddler balanced on her hip, waved as she approached the side gate. "Hope it's okay I brought my little one," she said, smiling. "Of course," Danielle replied, opening the gate. "He's welcome too." More neighbors trickled in over the next 20 minutes. Some came alone, others in pairs. A retired teacher brought homemade banana bread. A teenager, awkward but kind, offered to help set out extra chairs. Conversations started slow. About the weather, the new library hours, whether the community garden would reopen this summer. Normal things. Safe things. And then, just before 9, the gate creaked again. Mr. Henderson stood there, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched like he was bracing for something. He wore a clean polo shirt and looked like he hadn't slept much. He didn't say anything at first. Just nodded. Danielle met his eyes. "Glad you could make it," he cleared his throat. "Didn't know if I should." "You should," she said simply. "Coffee's hot." He stepped inside, keeping a careful distance at first, hovering near the edge of the group. No one ignored him, but no one rushed to greet him either. There was a quiet tension in the air, not hostile, just watchful. Danielle didn't start with an agenda. She let the morning unfold naturally. People sipped coffee, nibbled on pastries, chatted in small clusters. Kids chased each other around the yard, laughing. The sun broke through the clouds, warming the patio. After about 20 minutes, Danielle walked to the center of the space, not standing on anything, not raising her voice, just speaking like someone sharing a story over breakfast. "I wanted to do this," she began, "because I realized we don't really know each other. We live side by side, wave over fences, maybe borrow a cup of sugar, but how often do we actually talk? Like, really talk?" She paused. "A few weeks ago, I was sitting right here just enjoying a quiet morning. And someone called the police because they thought I didn't belong. They didn't know me. And honestly, I didn't know them either. She looked around, making eye contact with several neighbors, including Mr. Henderson, who stared at his coffee cup. I'm not here to shame anyone, she continued. Mistakes happen. Assumptions creep in when we don't take the time to see people as they are. But I do want us to ask ourselves, who gets the benefit of the doubt in our neighborhood? And who has to prove they belong just by existing? Silence settled, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was thoughtful. Then Lila spoke up. I moved here from another state 5 years ago. First week, someone asked if I was renting, like I couldn't possibly own my home. I smiled and said yes, even though I'd just paid off my mortgage. I was tired of explaining. A man near the back nodded. My son's biracial. People still ask him, where are you really from? Like his answer isn't enough. One by one, others shared. Small moments of being misread, overlooked, or quietly excluded. Not dramatic stories, but the kind that pile up over time and make you feel like a guest in your own life. Then, after a long pause, Mr. Henderson spoke. His voice was low, rough with emotion. I called that day because I didn't recognize you. And I assumed. He looked up, finally meeting Danielle's eyes. I didn't mean to make you feel unwelcome, but I see now that's exactly what I did. No excuses. No, but I was just being careful. Just honesty. Danielle walked over and sat in the chair beside him. Thank you for saying that. I should have knocked, he said. Asked your name. Introduced myself. Instead, I picked up the phone like you were a problem. You didn't know me, she said gently, but you can now. He nodded slowly. I'd like that. The rest of the morning unfolded like a slow exhale. People stayed longer than planned. The teenager helped Mr. Henderson carry a tray of cups back to the kitchen. Lila's toddler fell asleep in a lawn chair, wrapped in a light blanket. Someone put on soft music from a portable speaker, just enough to fill the quiet. Not drown it. There were no grand declarations. No promises to fix everything. But something real happened in that backyard. People saw each other, not as roles or assumptions, but as neighbors, with histories, regrets, hopes, and the shared desire to belong. As the group began to drift away, Mr. Henderson lingered. I've lived on this street for 23 years, he said. I thought I knew what this neighborhood was. But I guess I only knew part of it. Danielle smiled. There's always more to learn. He hesitated, then asked, would it be all right if I brought over some tomatoes from my garden next week? They're starting to ripen. I'd like that, she said. He nodded, turned and walked back through the gate. This time, shoulders a little straighter. Later, alone in the quiet backyard, Danielle sat in the same spot where she'd been sunbathing weeks before. The table was still set, a few mugs left behind, crumbs on a napkin. The air smelled like coffee and earth. She thought about all the times she'd been told to let it go, to not make it a big deal. But this wasn't about making a big deal. It was about making a connection. Real change, she realized, rarely comes with sirens or headlines. It happens in backyards over coffee, in the space between I'm sorry and I see you now. She poured herself one last cup, sat back and watched the sunlight dance on the water of her pool. No longer a symbol of suspicion, but of peace reclaimed. And for the first time since moving in, she felt like she truly lived here. Not because she owned the house, but because the people around her were finally starting to see her as one of their own. Not the police chief. Not the new neighbor. Just Danielle. And that was enough. Weeks passed, and the backyard coffee hour became something people talked about. Not in headlines or dramatic posts, but in quiet ways. A nod on the sidewalk lasted a second longer. A good morning carried more warmth. Mr. Henderson started, walking his dog in the afternoons again, and when he passed Danielle's house, he'd lift a hand in greeting. Sometimes he'd stop to ask how her garden was doing. Once he left a paper bag of ripe tomatoes on her porch with a note that just said, "From the vine today." Danielle didn't bring up the call again. Neither did he. But something had shifted between them, not erased but softened like a rough edge worn smooth by time and small kindnesses. Life in Oak Ridge settled into a new rhythm. The neighborhood chat still buzzed with lost pets and garage sale announcements. But there was a different tone now, less guarded, more open. Someone posted a photo of kids playing soccer in the cul-de-sac, with the caption, "This is what community looks like." Another shared a recipe for peach cobbler and added, "Made it with fruit from my tree. Happy to share next time." Danielle watched it all unfold from her porch, not as an outsider anymore, but as part of the fabric. Then came the visit from her niece. The girl was 13, bright-eyed, full of questions, and unafraid to speak her mind. She'd been staying with Danielle for a long weekend while her parents attended a work conference out of state. On Saturday morning, she burst through the back door in a swimsuit, goggles perched on her forehead, and without a word, cannonballed into the pool. Water splashed over the edge, soaking the patio stones. Danielle laughed, shaking her head. "You're going to give the neighbors a heart attack." "Let 'em watch," the girl called back, surfacing with a grin. "This pool's amazing." She swam laps, practiced handstands, floated on her back, staring at the clouds. At one point, she treaded water and said, "Aunt Danny, this is the safest place I know." Danielle paused, towel in hand. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," the girl said, shrugging. "It just feels like nothing bad can happen here. Like you built a bubble." Danielle smiled, but the words stayed with her. A bubble. Not a fortress, not a shield, but a space where peace wasn't just possible, it was practiced. Later that afternoon, as they sat on the patio eating watermelon, a local reporter stopped by. Not from a big city paper, but the weekly community newsletter, the kind printed on recycled paper and left in mailboxes every Thursday. The reporter, a soft-spoken woman in her 50s, had heard about the backyard gathering through a friend. "I'm not looking for drama," she said, sitting at the edge of the patio. "Just people, real stories." Danielle agreed to talk, but only if they kept it simple. No sensational headlines, no naming names, just the truth, gently told. The resulting piece ran 2 weeks later under the headline, "Building Trust One Backyard at a Time." It described how a quiet misunderstanding had led to an open conversation, how neighbors chose curiosity over suspicion, and how belonging isn't something you earn, it's something you recognize in each other. The article didn't go viral. It didn't need to. But it sparked more coffee hours on other streets. A few blocks over, a retired nurse hosted a tea and talk for seniors. Down the road, a group of teens organized a cleanup day at the local park. Small ripples, but real ones. At work, things changed too. Danielle used the experience to shape a new community engagement initiative, not mandatory training, but optional gatherings where officers and residents could meet off duty, share meals, ask honest questions. No uniforms, no radios, just people. One young officer admitted, "I never realized how much fear lives behind some calls, not just from the caller, but from the person on the other end, wondering if they'll be believed." Danielle nodded. "That's why we have to be more than responders. We have to be listeners." Summer deepened into early fall. The leaves on the oak trees began to turn gold at the edges. Danielle still rose early most days, still carried the weight of her role, but now she carried it differently, lighter somehow. Not because the world had changed overnight, but because she'd stopped waiting for permission to belong. She thought often about that morning by the pool, the one that started it all. How something so small, a phone call, a knock on the gate, could have ended in silence or shame.
Instead, it became a doorway, because real courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's sitting in your own backyard, refusing to hide. Sometimes it's showing up to a gathering you're not sure you're welcome at. And sometimes it's simply saying, "I was wrong," and meaning it.
One evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Danielle sat on her porch with a cup of chamomile tea. Her niece was inside, texting friends, music playing softly through her earbuds. Crickets sang in the garden. A neighbor walked by with their dog and called out, "Evening, evening," Danielle replied, raising her mug in return. In that moment, she felt it. Not triumph, not victory, but something quieter and deeper. Peace. Not the kind that comes from everything being perfect, but from knowing you've done your part to make things a little more human. She thought about All the people who'd never get a backyard coffee hour, whose calls ended in sirens, not conversations. She carried them with her, always. But she also believed that change could start small, in one street, one backyard, one honest look between neighbors, and maybe, just maybe, those small moments could add up to something bigger. The stars came out, one by one. The pool shimmered under the moonlight, still and calm. Danielle took a slow sip of tea, leaned back in her chair, and let the night wrap around her like a well-worn blanket. She was home. Not because of a deed or a title, but because she'd stayed, kind, steady, and unafraid to be seen. And in a world that often demands we shrink ourselves to fit in, that was its own kind of revolution.